I drove out to Oklahoma expecting silence. The kind of silence you only get on a farm, wind brushing through, corn stalks, cattle lowing in the distance, maybe the creak of an old barn door. That's what I wanted, peace. But instead of quiet, I was greeted by the metallic roar of bulldozers and the high-pitched beep of survey trucks reversing. My boots sank into fresh tire tracks cutting across the pasture. Orange stakes dotted the ground like someone had decided to play tic-tac-toe on my property. And then I saw her Linda Harris HOA president arms crossed sunglasses glinting like she was unveiling the eighth wonder of the world. Behind her, workers were spray painting long white lines that stretched across my cornfield. I almost laughed out loud. What's next? Linda direct, flights to Dallas, right behind my barn. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just another HOA project. This was a full-blown runway on my land. And trust me, they had no idea who they were messing with. Before we dive into this madness, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to see how far this HOA drama reaches. When I first pulled up to the farmhouse, I honestly thought maybe I had taken a wrong turn. The mailbox still had my dad's name half faded on the side. The same tin rooster we'd nailed to the fence 20 years ago was still wobbling in the wind, and the old barn leaned just a little more to the left than I remembered. But the air felt different. Not peaceful, busy, too busy. I had come back here for one reason, rest, running the Federal Aviation Administration in Washington, D.C. Isn't exactly a 9-to-5 job. My phone rings at 2 in the morning when some private pilot forgets to file a flight plan. I've signed more emergency orders than I can count, fought with airline CEOs, testified in front of Congress. By the time summer rolled around, I figured I'd earned a week of fishing, homegrown tomatoes, and maybe even a nap or two under the oak tree out back. Instead, I pulled into a construction zone that no one had bothered to tell me about. At first, I thought maybe the county was fixing the road. Oklahoma soil has a way of cracking asphalt wide open like a broken eggshell. But when I saw orange cones inside my pasture right next to the cattle pen, my gut told me this wasn't county business. This was HOA business. And that's the worst kind of business there. Island. I parked my truck, got out, and leaned against the hood, just taking it all in. A couple of guys in neon vests were pounding stakes into the ground. Another one held a clipboard, nodding like he was the architect of the next Pentagon. They barely glanced at me, as if I was just another piece of furniture in their grand design. That's when I heard the voice I'd been dreading, Linda Harris. If arrogance had a ringtone, it would be Linda's voice. Well, look who finally decided to visit his little farm, she called out, strutting toward me like she owned the place. We've been making improvements while you were away. Improvements, I echoed. Funny because I don't remember asking for them. She smirked, pulling her sunglasses down just enough to look me dead in the eye. John, progress doesn't wait for anyone. This community is moving forward, and if you want to be stuck in the past, that's your choice. But don't get in our way. I almost asked her right then and there what in God's name they were building, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way the surveyor kept checking his tape measure. Maybe it was the fact that the stakes were spaced exactly like a runway. Straight, even aligned with the prevailing wind. My professional instincts screamed louder than her smug little speech. But I didn't let her see it. Instead, I played dumb. Progress, huh? What are we talking? A new playground, maybe a bigger pool. Linda laughed like I just told the world's funniest joke. You'll see soon enough. Let's just say this neighborhood is about to become a very exclusive community. She walked away before I could press her further barking orders at the workers, waving her manicured hands like she was directing an orchestra. I stood there for a while, trying to convince myself I was wrong. Maybe it was just a road. Maybe they were putting in some kind of walking trail, a bike path for the kids. But deep down, I knew better. No HOA in the history of America has ever stopped at a bike path when they could chase something bigger, louder, and more ridiculous. Later that afternoon, I wandered down to the general store in town, the kind of place where gossip travels faster than a tornado. Old man Jenkins was behind the counter, chewing his toothpick, watching me over the top of his newspaper. Back in town, huh? He said. Yeah. Thought I'd get some peace and quiet. He chuckled. Not with Linda around. That's when I knew. If Jenkins was laughing, it meant the whole town already knew something I didn't. I asked him straight, what's she building out there? He leaned back, crossed his arms, and shook his head. Rumor is, she's been talking about making this neighborhood fly-in ready. You know, like those fancy communities down in Florida where rich folks land their private planes right next to their houses. I blinked. You're telling me she's building an airstrip? I'm telling you, he said slowly, that if you want peace and quiet, you picked the wrong farm to come home to. I drove back to the property in silence, his words ringing in my ears. Fly-in community. Private planes. Runway. It all made a twisted kind of sense now. Linda wasn't just flexing her HOA muscles, she was trying to turn my father's land into her personal airport. When I got back, I walked the property myself. The survey lines cut straight through the pasture past the pond ending right near the tree line. Perfect length for small aircraft. Perfect orientation for the wind. Perfectly illegal. I stood there at dusk listening to the crickets chirp and the bulldozers growl, and I knew two things for certain. One, my vacation was officially ruined. Two, Linda Harris had just declared war on the wrong man. Because I wasn't just John Miller, farmer. I was John Miller, director of the FAA. And if she thought she could sneak a runway past me, she was about to learn the hardest lesson of her life. The next morning, I woke up earlier than I planned. Not because I wanted to, but because the sound of engines shattered the dawn before the rooster even thought about crowing. At first, I thought maybe a crop duster had gotten lost and was circling low. It wouldn't be the first time some rookie pilot forgot his bearings over Oklahoma farmland. But when I stepped onto the porch, coffee mug in hand, I froze. They weren't just surveying anymore. They were building. A long strip of my cornfield was already stripped bare. Asphalt trucks lined up like they were pouring the foundation for a Walmart parking lot. Workers in neon vests rolled giant machines back and forth, pressing the earth flat. Spray-painted lines cut across my land, bold and white, stretching from one tree line to the other. And then I saw her, Linda Harris. She was standing dead center, wearing a hard hat. She definitely didn't need barking orders like a general in a war movie. Her sunglasses glinted in the sunrise, and she had that smile, smug, satisfied, the kind of smile only HOA presidents and cartoon villains know how to pull off. I walked across the pasture toward her, boots crunching in the gravel they had already laid down. "Morning, Linda. You building me a new driveway?" She didn't even look surprised to see me. "John, you should be thanking us. This is going to bring so much value to your property. Imagine the prestige neighbors landing their planes right across the street." "Planes?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You mean to tell me you're building a runway?" "Not just a runway," she corrected, lips curling into that practiced politician's smile. "An airstrip. A private airstrip for our community. This is the future. We'll be just like those luxury neighborhoods in Florida. You'll see, it'll be beautiful." I sipped my coffee and let her words sink in. An airstrip across my cornfield. Without permission. "You do realize this is my land, right?" I said, slowly, careful not to spill my coffee as my blood pressure spiked. She waved her manicured hand like she was swatting away a fly. "Technicalities. The board already approved it. We took a vote. Majority rules." I laughed so hard I nearly choked. "A vote on my property. That's rich. What's next? You going to vote on repainting the White House?" Linda didn't laugh. She just tilted her head, smug as ever. "Progress doesn't wait, John. You'll catch up eventually." I looked past her at the crew. Asphalt was already being poured, black steam rising in the morning air. The smell of tar mixed with the sweet scent of cut corn, and I couldn't help but think how absurd it was. My father had spent 40 years raising crops here, and now Linda was trying to raise aircraft. I turned back to her. "Linda, let me spell it out for you. You can't just build a runway wherever you feel like it. There are rules, regulations, federal law." Her smile widened. "Then sue us. By the time anything goes through court, this airstrip will be finished, operational, and celebrated by the whole community. People will love it. And if you don't, well, maybe it's time you consider selling." There it was. The threat. Sell or be steamrolled. Classic HOA. I wanted to blow up right there, but I didn't. Because for all her arrogance, Linda didn't know one very important fact. She was talking to the one man in the United States who had the authority to shut her little dream down permanently. But revealing that card too soon would spoil the fun. So I smiled. "You know, Linda, I think you're right. Maybe this will be interesting." I turned on my heel and walked back to the house, leaving her blinking, maybe even a little suspicious of how calm I was. That afternoon, I walked the length of the construction zone myself. The strip was at least 3,000 feet long, already more than enough for small planes. They had leveled the ground, perfectly aligned it with the wind, like a pilot had designed it. I crouched down, touched the fresh asphalt, and shook my head. They weren't guessing. They knew what they were doing, which meant Linda had help. Someone with aviation knowledge. Someone either really stupid or really desperate. By evening, the noise hadn't stopped. Trucks moved in and out, and the pasture that used to hum with cicadas now roared like a highway. My cattle clustered in the far corner, spooked by the constant rumble. I felt the weight of my father's legacy pressing on me. He'd fought tornadoes, droughts, and bad harvests, but never in his life did he imagine a homeowners association would try to build an airport on his land. I stood on the porch with another cup of coffee, and made myself a promise. Linda, you want to play pilot? Fine. But when this crashes, and it will, you'll wish you never laid eyes on this farm. And deep down, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that every inch of this runway was already mine to destroy. Not as a farmer, not as a landowner, but as the director of the FAA. And soon enough, I was going to remind them exactly what that meant. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, I had made up my mind I wasn't going to sit quietly on the porch and watch them pave my land into their private airport. I needed to hear exactly how far they thought they could push me. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile little building with beige walls and folding chairs that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and desperation. I walked in, and instantly, every head turned. You'd think I was an outlaw walking into a saloon. Some nodded politely. Others whispered. But Linda Harris, she beamed like she'd been waiting for this showdown all week. John Miller, she announced, clapping her hands together. Glad you could finally join us. We were just discussing our community's bright new future. I took a seat in the back row, arms crossed, trying not to roll my eyes. Funny. I thought the future of my farm might include me. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Not the friendly kind, more the awkward, let's pretend he's joking kind. Linda raised a hand for silence. John, no one is trying to exclude you, she said sweetly, though the venom was obvious. We're simply moving forward with what the majority has decided. Progress requires vision, sacrifice, and leadership. I leaned forward. Leadership is one thing. Bulldozing federal property without permission is another. That made a few people shift in their seats. Linda didn't flinch. She slid a stack of papers onto the podium like she was dealing cards in Vegas. The community voted, 73% in favor of developing the airstrip. The numbers don't lie. The numbers don't own my land, I shot back. A man in the front row, a retiree with too much cologne and not enough common sense, snorted. If you don't like it, sell and move. Someone else will appreciate the vision. Vision. That word was getting tossed around like confetti. I pictured Linda lying awake at night, dreaming of planes descending into her little kingdom, HOA bylaws fluttering like flags in the wind. The whole thing would have been hilarious if it wasn't happening on my property. I stood up, pulled the deed to the farm from my jacket, and held it high for everyone to see. This isn't just a piece of paper. This is proof that my father bought and owned this land long before any of you thought of putting up vinyl fences and neighborhood watch signs. You don't get to vote your way onto my property. Silence. For one brief, glorious moment, I thought maybe I had gotten through. Then Linda smiled, that smile, the one that makes you want to check your wallet and your sanity at the same time. John, we appreciate your sentimentality, but the world doesn't stop for nostalgia. This airstrip will benefit everyone. Higher property values, new opportunities, more prestige. You should be thanking us. I laughed sharp and bitter. Prestige. You're pouring asphalt across a cornfield. This isn't prestige, it's insanity. That broke the tension. Half the room chuckled. A few even clapped softly as if they'd been waiting for someone to say it. But Linda slammed her hand on the podium. Enough! Her voice cracked like a whip. This project is happening. And if you don't cooperate, we will fine you for every obstruction, every delay, every so-called violation you cause. The HOA has authority, Mr. Miller, and you will respect it. I stepped closer to the podium, lowering my voice, but making sure everyone could hear. Linda, let me explain something. You might be able to bully neighbors into repainting mailboxes or cutting their grass a half-inch shorter, but when it comes to airspace and runways, you're not in charge. Not even close. Her eyes narrowed. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Is that a threat, she asked? No, I said, smiling coldly. That's a fact. The room buzzed. People leaned toward each other, whispering. Linda banged her gavel on the table like she was presiding over a courtroom. Meeting adjourned, everyone out. Chairs scraped against the floor as people shuffled out, whispering louder now. Some avoided my gaze. Others gave me the tiniest nods of encouragement, like maybe they were tired of Linda's reign but too scared to say it. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at her, waiting. She finally looked up, her face tight. You're making a mistake, John. We're too far along. The runway will be built. The community wants it. You can't stop us. I tucked the deed back into my jacket. We'll see. Then I turned and walked out, leaving her fuming behind the podium, clutching her papers like they could somehow shield her from reality. Out in the parking lot, the summer air was thick with heat, and the faint smell of fresh asphalt drifting from my farm. I slid into my truck, sat there for a moment, and let out a long breath. They thought they had me cornered. They thought a vote and a few trucks could steamroll me into submission. What they didn't know, what Linda, in all her arrogance, couldn't begin to imagine, was that I wasn't just John Miller, the farmer's son. I was the man who signed the papers, who held the authority, who decided whether runways lived or died in this country. And she had just declared war on the director of the FAA. If I thought Linda Harris and her merry band of clipboard warriors would back off after the meeting, I was dead wrong. If anything, my defiance only fueled her obsession. Within days, the HOA turned my life at the farm into something between a construction zone and a battlefield. The first salvo came in the form of a letter, an official notice of violation tucked neatly under my front door like some kind of junk mail from hell. In bold letters, it claimed I was obstructing community progress by leaving farm equipment too close to the development site. Translation: I had parked my tractor in my own field. I crumpled the paper, tossed it straight into the trash, and muttered, "Obstruction, lady, this is called farming." But that was just the warm-up. By the next morning, the bulldozers were back, roaring louder than church bells on Sunday. They didn't even bother with courtesy hours. At 6 a.m., they were flattening ground so close to my barn that the windows rattled. Dust rose into the air like a sandstorm, coating the porch, the cattle troughs, and my morning coffee before I could even take a sip. The cattle panicked, charging to the far end of the pasture. My dog barked until he was hoarse. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold. That's when Linda strutted into view, heels clicking on gravel like she was walking a runway, pun intended. "Morning, John," she shouted over the din of engines. "Beautiful, isn't it? Progress in motion." I raised my cup. "You call this progress? My cows call it a nervous breakdown." She ignored me, of course. She always did. She turned to her workers and clapped her hands. "Faster, we're on schedule, schedule." The word hit me like a dart. This wasn't some half-baked idea anymore. Linda had a timeline. She was pushing hard, maybe even hoping to finish before anyone could stop her. Later that day, another letter arrived, this time threatening fines. According to the HOA, I owed them $500 for failure to comply with development guidelines. Development guidelines. On my own land. I laughed so hard, I nearly tore the paper in half. But the harassment didn't stop with letters. No, Linda turned it into theater. Every afternoon, she drove past in her shiny black SUV, slowing down just enough to roll her window down and smirk. Still resisting John, she'd call out like it was a game show. One evening, I found a brand new sign hammered into the edge of my property: "Future HOA Runway. Private Use." The letters gleamed in bright blue paint as if mocking me. Beneath it, smaller text read, "Opening soon. Exclusive access." I ripped the sign out of the ground and tossed it into the back of my truck. But the image burned in my mind. Linda wasn't bluffing anymore. She was advertising. That night, I sat at my father's old kitchen table, papers spread out before me. Deeds, photographs, videos of the construction, copies of the letters. The farmhouse smelled faintly of coffee and frustration. I could almost hear my father's voice saying, "Don't let them push you, son. Miller land is Miller land." But I wasn't just a Miller. I was also director of the FAA. And Linda was practically writing me a handbook on how to bury her project. Still, I didn't reveal my secret. Not yet. Because there's something deeply satisfying about letting an enemy dig their own grave while they laugh at you. Days blurred into a routine of harassment. More letters, more noise. One morning I woke to find bright orange cones lined up across my driveway, blocking me from leaving. HOA safety measures, according to another notice. I moved them aside with my truck bumper one by one, leaving a trail of crushed plastic behind me. The looks on the workers' faces as I drove past worth it. Neighbors started whispering too. Some were furious. Dust was coating their cars. The noise shook their windows. Others were enchanted by Linda's dream, fantasizing about sipping cocktails while private jets landed across the pasture. But one thing was clear: I was now the villain in Linda's fairy tale. She even said it to my face one afternoon. "You're standing in the way of history, John," she snapped, blocking my path with her clipboard like it was a sword. "People will remember you as the stubborn